The Hudson's Gate, New York in the 1600s and the 17th century, the island at the mouth of the Hudson River, was a shape-shifting place, bending to the will of frontier winds. It began as a sparse Dutch trading outpost, a tentative scratch on a vast continent, only to become a prize fought over by distant crowns. Its early days were framed by timber homes, rutted paths, and the stubborn bulk of a small fort when English sails eventually darkened the horizon. The colony's allegiance changed not with the roar of cannon, but with the quiet sigh of surrender. The guttural rhythms of Dutch speech gradually faded, replaced by the cadence of a new authority and a new name. By the centuries close, this settlement had become a restless, growing nexus of ambition perched on the edge of a wilderness. This was New York, being born. The story truly began in one Henry Hudson's vessel, nosed into the river that would later bear his name. His crew came ashore on a wooded tidal bank, a place crisscrossed by Lenape paths and alive with exchange. That first, tentative footfall was a quiet prologue that soon drew merchants, dreamers, and rival empires across the Atlantic. It was an unceremonious arrival fraught with uncertainty, yet it unlocked a door to an unimaginable future. In 1626, Dutch representatives concluded an agreement with the Lenape people for the use of Manhattan, a transaction later famously equated with 60 guilders worth of tools and cloth. The exchange was pragmatic, conducted in a space of profound cultural divergence, yet it granted the Dutch the legal fiction they sought. Quickly, they moved to make their claim tangible, transforming that foothold into something they could defend. Building New Amsterdam was an act of relentless exertion. Settlers, their muscles burning, took hand axes to the island's dense forests. The air thrummed with the crack of splitting timber and hung heavy with wood smoke and sweat. They hauled immense logs through sucking mud to raise not just homes, but a palisade, warehouses, and a sense of order. The colony was hewn, beam by aching beam, from the relentless wilderness. To guard their investment, the Dutch erected Fort Amsterdam in 1066 at Manhattan's southern tip. It was a rough-hewn structure of earth and timber. But from its ramparts, soldiers watched the harbor's cryptic tides, the West India Company's storehouses, and the fragile community taking root. The fort was both shield and symbol, a declaration that this foothold was intended to endure. Conflict was inevitable. By 1643, tensions between settlers and native nations had erupted into violence. A year later, a series of fragile treaties were forged. Not around grand tables, but in the flickering light of council fires. Promises were woven into wampum belts, concessions made from a place of exhaustion rather than trust. This hard-won, brittle peace allowed New Amsterdam a moment to draw breath and rebuild. A quiet, brutal transformation was underway. From 1655, enslaved Africans were brought into the colony in increasing numbers by the Dutch West India Company. Their forced labor became the sinew of the growing settlement, integral to its docks, its farm plots, and its households, governed by harsh ordinances and constant surveillance. Their bondage was a grim turning point, weaving the threads of slavery into the very fabric of the city's early economy. Life within a mid-century New Amsterdam home unfolded in the glow of a single hearth. A typical dwelling was a single crowded room, where light from small leaded windows fell upon a rough-hewn table, woolen blankets and pewter dishes stacked on a shelf. Families rose at dawn to the scent of porridge. The day was a chorus of shared labor. Children grinding grain, adults mending nets or salting meat for winter. The air held a complex perfume of wood smoke, drying herbs, and the damp breath of the river seeping through the walls. Evenings were quiet, but full stories told in low voices by guttering candlelight, tools laid out for the morning. Life was disciplined, communal, and modest. Every chore, from sewing to chopping wood, pulsed with the steady rhythm of survival. In 1664, the horizon altered. English men of war glided into the harbor, their gunports open and trained on the fort flying the Dutch Lion. Outnumbered and politically fractured, New Amsterdam's spirit for a fight dissolved. Director General Peter Stuyvesant's defiance was overruled by colonists weary of mismanagement and yearning for stable rule. The surrender was quiet, the transition shockingly bloodless. The city passed into English hands and, in that moment, received its enduring name, New York. The Treaty of Breda in 1667 made official what force had begun. In a cold calculus of empire, the Dutch ceded New Netherland to England in exchange for securing their hold on Suriname. With a diplomat's pen stroke, New York's future was irrevocably tethered to the English crown, its laws, loyalties, and trajectory reset. History briefly stuttered in 1603. Dutch warships surged back into the harbor, reclaiming the city in a swift martial gesture. They raised their old banners and renamed it New Orange. For one restless year, the past seemed to return. But empires traded lands like cards. The following treaty returned the colony to England, and New Orange faded back into New York, a brief, defiant flicker before the English narrative sealed shut. Yet the Dutch soul of the place lingered. By 679, the old Dutch Stadhuis served as New York City Hall, its sturdy form now housing English rule. Magistrates and merchants conducted business in its cramped rooms, settling disputes and recording the commerce of a burgeoning port. The building was a physical memory, still central and useful, even as the city it governed evolved beyond its origins. By 600 CE, New York was straining at its seams under English governance. Its population surged past 4,000 souls. Brick homes now shouldered alongside older wooden ones, and the port buzzed with Atlantic traffic. This growth was shadowed by the sharp increase in the enslaved population, whose coerced labor underpinned the colony's accelerating economy. The heart of this commerce was the Great Dock, jutting into the East River. A perpetual cacophony of creaking planks shouted orders, and rolling casks filled the air. Here, sugar from the Caribbean, furs from the interior, and manufactured goods from Europe were exchanged. The dock was the colony's bustling pulse point, a symbol of its ambitions to become a vital link in the imperial chain. Architecturally, the city was a palimpsest. The streetscape remained deeply Dutch, steep brick gables, stepped roofs, and thick beams, but under English influence, newer buildings sprouted sash windows and broader chimneys. The city, like its polyglot inhabitants, was a work in progress, a blend of memory and adaptation. The old wooden wall, from which Wall Street would later take its name, still demarcated the northern frontier of settlement. Where this palisade met the river stood the Watergate, a simple fortified passage where all carts, travelers, and goods from the east were inspected, a reminder of the perpetual watchfulness of frontier life. In 689, tumult arrived from across the sea. News of England's glorious revolution sparked a crisis of authority in New York. The city's militia, a trained band of Dutch, English, and colonial-born merchants and artisans, drilled on the commons amidst a fog of rumor and shifting allegiance. In the uncertainty, some officers even pledged support to the deposed James Dye. But this spark of rebellion was quickly dampened. By year's end, royal authority was reasserted, the moment of defiance passing into the record, a testament to the colony's tense navigation between distant political storms. The decade closed with the city straining toward its destiny. By 1699, Pearl Street hummed with activity, tracing the curve of the original shoreline. Its narrow lane was crowded with the workshops of co-opers and sailmakers, its air spiced with tar, turned earth, and the ever-present tang of the sea. That salt scent was the constant, a reminder that this place of growing ambition was, and would always be, a creature of the water, a gateway between a continent and the world. The foundational century had ended. The stage for a metropolis was set.